Training camp is a month away. Are the Capitals ready? We'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. In today's episode, we talk about the outlook for 23-24. Can you believe it? Training camp is just a month away. What can we expect? A little bit later, we will talk about Alex Ovechkin's goal chase. But just to get it going here, we will talk about Tom Wilson's new contract and what that means for the Capitals. And in today's episode, we have Hockey Troll of the Caps Chirp podcast. Hockey Troll, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on again. It's going to be a good episode. I can feel it. And I hope your summer's been going well. If you're staying, I guess, cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's been hot around here as well, and I hate to say it, but I'm kind of looking forward to the fall, not only because of the temperature, but hockey. It's just the heat. It gets a little bit too much for me here, but one of the last times that you were on here, we were talking about Tom Wilson, and there was all kinds of trade chatter out there. Stephen Wino was talking about on the Daily Face-Off that if he saw one move happen, he could see Tom Wilson getting dealt. I've dealt with a lot of comments from Twitter and YouTube saying, Dan, you're crazy. This is never going to happen. Tell that to Wayne Gretzky. Things like that do happen. And one of the players on the team that holds tremendous value is Tom Wilson. So that's where that emanates from. But we can crumple that all up and throw it in the garbage can because he signed a 7-year new deal. I don't want to think about how old I'm going to be once that contract expires. But in any case, I see him being the next captain of the Capitals. What were your initial reactions to the new 7-year deal? Kind of unheard of in modern hockey times. And where do you see him in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess it was no surprise to me. I figured they were going to lock him up. They needed to. I agree. I think he's going to be the next captain. The big thing for me was I think that there was a lot of trade speculation and people were like, oh, we're going to get I don't know, insert top 3 forward plus a first round. They were crazy projections for Tom Wilson. For the right team, maybe. But honestly, I think he's got way more value for the Washington Capitals as a Washington Capital. I do agree that the pickings were slim in the sense of the trade market, and Tom Wilson would have made sense. I can see why people would think that. But, I think that the Washington Capitals have a lot in his future planned, and I just didn't think that they were going to let him go. Also, I don't care about the term. We're going to get this guy the entirety of his prime. I don't think the top's in yet for Tom Wilson. I thought that last season he was going to break out and eclipse his previous points record in one season, or points personal best. And then he got injured. But I definitely think that the top is not in for this type of player. I think that we're going to see a bigger, better Tom Wilson coming into next season. And, I think that the 6.5 a year is negligible. By the time that contract's in the final 3 years of its life, you would hope that the cap is pushing 100 million. I would hope, right? I mean, that's 6-7 years. The NHL has shown tremendous growth in spite of their poor marketing. I think that it's, the sky's the limit here after this COVID hit. So I think that honestly, 6.5 is a team friendly deal. I definitely think somebody would have paid him 7, 8 even for short term, maybe a couple years, get us over the hump. Teams like Toronto, teams that are, right there, maybe need a little bit of grit, a little bit of power forward, and a defensive minded scoring threat, So I think he could have tested the market and probably got more. if it came to it. But obviously, he wanted to be here. We wanted him here, and I'm overjoyed with. I think that that's a good deal. I think the deal's good.
Yeah, I was of the belief that, give him whatever he wants. Give him the checkbook, have him fill it out. If you overpay, if the contract's too long, it really doesn't matter. He is a bit of a four-leaf clover, I guess you could say. Just taking a look at him, he is a three-time 20-goal scorer who broke out with a career high 24 goals, 28 assists, and 52 points in 21-22, where he also named the Metro Division All-Star team. He had 22 points in 33 games this past season. We do know that he missed a lion's share of the season, or a good chunk of it, shall we say, just based on that knee injury that he suffered the year before in the playoffs. Kind of makes you wonder what position the Capitals would have been in if Tom Wilson, John Carlson, and Nick Backstrom were in there. Do you see the Capitals being in the playoffs this past season if all those players were in play?
If Backstrom's hip wasn't an actual issue, yeah, maybe. We were close there. It really came down to the last 6 games of the season for us to not punch the card to the dance. So yeah, I definitely think if Tom Wilson was in the lineup, it would have been good. I've said it a million times. I feel bad for Laviolette and the injury card and the COVID card that he was dealt during his tenure as a Washington Capital. But because I saw flashes of brilliance, with his stuff, with the product on the ice. But yeah, I do think that the Washington Capitals would have been able to put a more concentrated and honestly they would have been in for the marathon rather than the sprint that they needed at the end, with Backstrom coming back and Wilson coming back. So yeah, I would say I'm a homer, so I think the Washington Capitals are a playoff team every year. So, and this year included.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting this next season. As we know, we got Spencer Carberry and all that, so it's going to be a lot of different looks out there. And I think that Tom Wilson is definitely a person that will help aid in that push as well. All right, so coming up here, we will talk about Alex Ovechkin's goal chase. He is projected to hit it in the 24-25 season. Is that a realistic thing? We'll talk about that straight ahead. Covering my nutritional bases for the day literally couldn't be easier, which is why I trust AG1. I just mix one small scoop with water and drink it first thing each morning. Done. I also like that it costs less than $3 a day. Pretty good if you ask me. It's a really effective daily habit with a high quality sourced ingredient. It's a win-win. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs. With your first purchase, go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL network. Check it out. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure and subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, in this next segment here, we are joined by the hockey troll of the Caps Chirp podcast, and training camp is a month away, and Alex Ovechkin is chipping away, and he's getting ready for next season. As we know, he trains really hard in the off season. So right now, as it stands, he has 822 career goals, 73 goals until the record, and his projected year of doing it is the 24-25 season. Do you think this is attainable? We always hear that he is the Russian machine that never breaks, but he is going to be 38 years old here soon. Is it still possible?
Absolutely. I've got last year I thought Ovi was going to score 55. He came 10 short of that. You know what? So this year I'm going to say I'm going to pull the chain back, and I'll say that he'll match his last year's goal total. It's still there. It's so funny. I just saw one of his Instagram stories, and he's dancing at an event. And do you remember the first 7 years of his career, every time summer footage of him partying would come out, people would be like, Ovi looks fat. It's he had the most judged body in the entire NHL over the offseason. Oh, Ovi's he's washed, he's too fat, he's coming back to the team fat as hell. People don't remember, apparently, that he came into combine in like jeans, like tight jeans and like a ripped up like tank top, and went out and absolutely dusted everyone in the combine. He could outrun them, he could outjump them, lifting, all of it. I mean, the guy is an absolute freak of nature. I always say, like, if this was 1,000 years ago, we'd be throwing him money, women, booze, anything to subdue him from ripping everybody's head off around him. He possesses that power. So I think, yes, of course, I would be very surprised if he doesn't score 40 goals this season. It'd be a full season. I don't think he's ever scored less than 40, except for maybe the one Dale Hunter season. And that was when
sounds about right.
They're like, Ovi, you need to come in and block shots and, muck it up and, play old school hockey down in the corners and stuff like that. So, yes, 40s, it's coming up. I think it's going to be 45, probably 60.
Yeah, Dale Hunter hockey, that was some memories where they wanted all the players, including the big names, laying in front of the puck trying to stop it. It was effective, but I don't think it was sustainable in the long term. And one of the things I remember about Dale Hunter is I'm like, he's not going to be here that long. If you remember, I remember he only owned one suit. And that was the big thing that they were talking about, is this guy doesn't want to buy another suit. And finally, Ted Leonsis went out and bought him another suit. But as we talk about Alex Ovechkin, we talk about his earlier years. And if you remember him in the All-Star game, he had the cowboy hat on and he was doing the thing like his hockey stick is on fire. He has since grown up quite a bit. And as I talked about in the first segment about Tom Wilson, is it all the things that I'm hearing out there is that Alex Ovechkin is taking Tom Wilson under his wing, kind of leading him in the way of how to be a captain, that you don't need to drop the gloves with everyone that wants to. If you're some fourth line AHLer out there that's trying to make the name for yourself, you don't have to do it. So we have seen a certain maturation in Tom Wilson and Alex Ovechkin. If I remember right, the last major fight that Ovi was in was against Svechnikov, and that was in 2019. So you really have to kind of get him riled up to irritate him. You got to think that he was probably whispering something in Russian that just really got him going here. But as we take a look historically on Alex Ovechkin and what he's done for this team, I couldn't think of any crazier scenario than him not being on this team. But he only has 3 years left on his deal. Of course, he could always get an extension of something of that nature. But what do you think we can expect from Alex Ovechkin these next 3 years?
40 goals a year, baby. I mean, I honestly don't think that he's going to stop after breaking Gretzky's record. I think he's going to smash right through it. And I think that he'll probably beat it by like double digits. He wants to put space between him and Gretzky, of course. I love that you brought up the history and like Tom Wilson and things, and just kind of not to throw it back to the beginning of the episode. Ovechkin, Tom Wilson, DC hockey. I don't think that anyone could ever comment and say, if you're a Caps fan or not, that the Washington Capitals do not have an identity. And I think that identity is a hard forechecking team. We generally have big bodies out there, big guys. All of our guys are big, and we can bang, and we can also put the puck in the back of the net. So I think that that's really kind of with Tom Wilson, with Ovi, they're born Washington Capitals, right? So I think that that's hugely important. I think that having an identity and having that storyline to follow is great for both marketing, but also just to be a fan of. It really sucks. Imagine, not to be picking on anyone, but like imagine being like a fan of the Columbus Blue Jackets or the Arizona Coyotes, right? Like what can you say about your team other than you're a revolving door of basically, what could be considered the farm league of the rest of the NHL, right? Like what's your on ice play like that you can get behind? And I think that, and that's talked about a lot. GMs talk about it, coaches talk about it. Barry Trotz was huge into it, right? Like we want people to be scared to play us. And if, we're going to try like hell to win, and hopefully we're going to win a lot. But if we do lose, that opponent's going to pay with a pound of flesh, right? So I think that that's very DC hockey, and I love it. That's why I'm, huge Caps fan.
Yeah, and as we take a look at it, this next season is going to be interesting. We know his right-hand man, a guy that has assisted on more OV goals than anyone else. Nick Backstrom had that hip resurfacing procedure done, and when Brian McClellan was asked about it, he said kind of wait and see attitude. We'll see how he's going to be, but he's kind of talked more recently. He's kind of backstepped those comments a little bit and said that, he's making good progress. So if we take a look at Nick Backstrom, everyone's like, when we were talking about trades and what players should get traded, well, people had mentioned Nick Backstrom or TJ Oshie, but everyone can see the back of their hockey card. We know that they're not the same player they were 5+ years ago. So if Nick Backstrom is healthy, that is going to be key for this team, being that he has assisted on more OV goals than anything else. How important is it for Nick Backstrom to be healthy, even though they don't really play on the same line too often anymore?
I think even like a 50%, which is pretty much what we were seeing Nick Backstrom at the past couple of years, is still an effective player. The hockey IQ is, next level. His defensive game is good. Obviously, the mobility is something that he's going to have to cope with and figure out. And honestly, I think that we owe Nick Backstrom at least a season. He didn't get a full season. Let's give him a season. Let's see how it goes before we all start, sharpening the pitchforks and bringing out the torches. But to be completely honest, what I think the keys to success for on next year are going to be, what's Mantha going to do? He's apparently dropped some weight, taking his conditioning very seriously, seeing a sports psychologist, trying to get over, get out of his own way, because we know that he's an elite talent. He's got the pedigree. He's been billed as a top 3 forward on any team in the NHL since he was drafted. It's never really panned out, but he has all the physical pieces. He's just got to put them together. And then Kuznetsov. Can Kuznetsov come? I think that honestly, this team lives and dies by Kuznetsov. Honestly, just the way that everything is structured right now, considering he is the number 1 center. Dylan Strome's going to put a fire under him, I think. But at the same time, another kind of mental thing is, I think Kuznetsov and Carl Alsner said that, like, he's always a fun player, but when he is having fun, he can basically just toy with all the talent in the NHL. He can take over games at will just by having fun. And so those 2 players, and then the third thing would be the young depth, right? I see Protas making the lineup. I see Alexiev in the lineup. Connor McMichael, it's time to show up, man. It's time to come out, score 20 goals, hit that 40-point mark, not be a defensive liability out there, maybe throw the body a couple times, cause some turnovers, catch the coach's eye, catch the audience's eye. And then whoever else that we're bringing up, whether it be, Johansson, the Hershey Bears had a great postseason with a lot of guys who performed really well. We let some go. Fukale went to Russia. Pilon, I think he's out. So, I'm not completely sold that the team will live and die on Nick Backstrom. There's 21 other guys on the ice or on the bench at the same time. And I can't wait to see what Spencer Carberry can do.
It is going to be exciting, and that's what we'll talk about next here is, what is the outlook for this Capitals team in the 23-24 season? We'll talk about that next. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So in this next segment here, we are going to talk about the outlook for this coming season here. Like I talked about, training camp is next month, if you can believe it. So there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of players fighting for jobs. This is going to be the make or break. I've spoke about with you this multiple times for Connor McMichael. I really believe it. Either he finds a spot on the big team, or I think it's time to move on from him. I think it's also the season for Malenstein. But then there's also talk about Protas and all these people. The thing that I've always said, though, is where they all going to fit. And one of the things that Bailey from the Washington Post said is that it's not where they're going to fit. It's about who's going to play so well that you can't take them out of the lineup. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it. So there are some players that are going to be fighting for that. Let's talk first here about Connor McMichael, a player we hear about every single year. The thing I really like about him is his maturity level, is that he was on the big team, the Caps, last season, and then he was a healthy scratch and got sent down to Hershey, but he didn't sulk, he didn't moan. He helped that Hershey team all season and then win a Calder Cup. This is the season for Connor McMichael. I believe it. Do you?
I think it has to be. Again, that's a guy with pedigree, Team Canada, high accolades there. But, you're playing with Team Canada. I mean, geez, I feel like Team Canada could cut their entire starting lineup and then go again and still put a good showing out in all international play. But to your point, yeah, I mean, I think that this is, nut up or shut up for Connor McMichael. And it's really easy for me to pile on this kid. And I've been doing that for like a year. But ultimately, I want to see him succeed. I want to see him bury. I want to see that release. I want to see it go into the back of the net. I don't, he's been billed as like a sniper and a bit of a playmaker. So the big thing with the shot, like I'd love to just see him come through in like the first couple games that he gets in and bury a couple. And I think that would be huge and continue that, build upon that early, bury some early, and then get on. Don't be invisible out there. You're absolutely right, though. It isn't, who are they going to pick? It's who is going to play so well that you just can't take them out. And if Connor McMichael does that, that'd be great. Someone who I think will do that is Alexei Protas. So, and then the thing about Protas is that he's comfortable on the fourth line. He's like, yeah, I'm just like happy to be here. At least that's what it seems. Connor McMichael, I need to see him, Carberry, the whole knock against the coaching staff forever with McMichael's development has been he hasn't gotten top 6 minutes consistently. So Carberry may give it to him, or he may just seize the lost cause, and that's his call. And then he's going to have to work his way up from the bottom 6 up. But either way, I'm pulling for him 100%. I would love to see what he's, him come to what he's billed to be.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And again, I think that this is the season. Everything that I saw him playing in Hershey in the playoffs, he's so mature and he's just really worked on his game. I think he's ready for the next level. Another player that some people are like, are you crazy, Dan? I think it's going to happen. I think this is going to be the season for Ivan Mirchenko on the Caps. He was able to break off his deal with the KHL and is poised to be playing for the Hershey Bears, at least to start the season. But he's kind of breaking through everything. We know he had that Hodgkin's lymphoma. He was skinny. His jeans were kind of just hanging on his hips, but he's put in the work. There's videos I've seen online of him hitting the gym really hard. He seems to have that determination, that fire in his belly that he wants to be on the big team. I see Ivan Mirchenko playing on the big team at least some point next season. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think that he's, it's funny because when you look at the Caps farm system, especially when it comes to Hershey, you forget about these guys who are playing in Sweden. These guys are playing in the KHL. Mirchenko, I mean, I think that he's, from the lower, because he had to work his way back up. He was playing in like the not top tier KHL club, went up, and I mean, he dusted everybody in that league. Went up, had an okay 15 games or so, but if he thinks he's ready for the North American game, I'd love to see it. Obviously, the kid can battle anything, so love to see that. And yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing him on the NHL roster at least a couple times this season, especially because he's coming to Hershey. And I think that camp is going to be a huge indicator because it's a brand new coaching staff's first look at everyone in a real serious situation. And just to see the compete level and see, because, we've talked last couple seasons, we were saying like, how crappy is it to be a Washington Capital prospect who has aspirations to be a top 6 forward? Because it was so locked in. Now cracks are showing, there are, the door is creaking open. You can definitely, make a case for yourself in camp and just how you're playing Hershey.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think that Ivan is almost following the same trajectory as Alex Ovechkin, maybe an Ovi 2.0. I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but I know the last time that you were on, it was shortly before the draft, and who the Capitals selected was Leonard and Chris Stahl. Some interesting things. I think that Ryan Leonard was a home run. There's nothing. I love his game. We saw him in camp, the videos and everything that he hit so hard that he broke Clark's glove. So he definitely has some pop with that glove. A good shot. A big guy. I kind of saw comparables to Tom Wilson, but he said he sees himself more as like a Kachuk, an Austin Matthews, that kind of thing. So A plus. And then as we take a look at Chris Stahl, which is a little bit more interesting for me. He was drafted in the second round, even though everyone thought he would be in the first round. But everything that I've read and saw about him is that it was inconsistent play and his size, and that some people are saying, I had locked on NHL prospects, there is a possibility he never even plays NHL hockey. Second round pick. That's crazy to think about. What were your reactions to the draft? Let's just say the first two picks anyway.
Yeah, I thought we got a lot of value up and down, all of our picks. But I will say that I've got some friends in out the West Coast in BC, and they said that you are going to love watching this Crystal guy play. He's just a magician on the ice. He can take over. He's billed as a good playmaker, a great skater. I love to see it. The big knock on him is that he's small. But guys like Connor Sheary have carved out a good career in the NHL. And the flip side, which honestly the odds are stacked against him. Once you get out of the first round, the percentage that you are going to play more than 100 games in the NHL falls off a cliff. It's single digits percentage, double digits, barely, that you're actually going to have a long career in the NHL. So he could be a bust. But I love this Leonard kid. Love to see another American getting drafted. Love that. I'll be happy to see the American counterpart of the Bash brothers with Tom Wilson once he gets up in the lineup.
Yeah, that's what I've always thought about. Can you imagine both of them guys on the ice at the same time? So the one thing about Chris Stahl is Connor Bedard said the smartest hockey player he's ever played with, and also whatever team drafts him is going to be very lucky. That is quite a praise given by Connor Bedard, who was picked first overall. Listen, Hockey Troll, I want to thank you for joining us on this edition of Locked On Capitals. Why don't you tell everyone where we can find your work?
Yeah, man. Thanks. It's always a pleasure. You can find me on Twitter at Hockey Trollin with an IN. You can find Caps Chirp on all social media at Caps Chirp.
All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining us on this edition of Locked On Capitals. And are you a fan of other DC sports? Well, Locked On has got you covered. We have Locked On Nationals, Commanders, or Wizards. So no matter what major DC sport it is, Locked On has got you covered. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining us on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.